Hello, this is Justin Scott, and you're listening to Tale of the Manticore, a top-shelf podcast about Dungeons & Dragons. You should enjoy because everyone should enjoy. It's great.
The following podcast is intended for a mature audience. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome back to Tale of the Manticore, Season 3. Like the creature from which it takes its name, Tale of the Manticore is a mashup, a crossbreeding between two different species of storytelling. Here you will find the unpredictability of old-school paper and dice games with the storycraft of a dark fantasy novel. No character is sacred, and none will be spared if the dice decide their fate is at hand. According to lore, the tail of a manticore is barbed with cruel iron spikes. There will be much pain in the days ahead. Last time, on Tale of the Manticore. The previous chapter begins immediately after the fight with the giant forest troll, which surprisingly ends with the monster fleeing the battle. The companions waste no time in leaving the area. They head north in an attempt to correct their course in the search for the recluse, Odok Zygog, while still putting distance between themselves and the fearsome troll. The going is slow because of the injuries sustained by Cord and the Blink Dog, the latter of which must be carried. A conversation in which Dureni quotes a dwarven idiom leads to a flashback where we learn that the elf, before he became a hunter, began his adult life as a trader. The story then shifts to a second flashback, this one concerning Aldve. One day, before Achille was born, Aldve comes across a young elfin woman fast asleep in the forest near his home. When the elf wakes up and the two look into each other's eyes, they immediately fall in love. The chapter concludes when the party makes camp, now a day and a half's journey north of Duroth, and a safe distance from the troll. Before she goes to sleep, Achille gives their newest companion a name. Flicker has joined the party as, well, not really as a player character, but as a member of the group, and will remain with them for some time, I think. This is the result of a successful stumble upon 20 from earlier in the story, combined with the party's victory over the direwolves. But you know, in the 5 years I've been making this podcast, I've never had a group this large. We are now up to 7 party members, if you include Robin. And again, including the taxidermied bird, 3 of them are more or less non-verbal. In a game, this would not be especially hard to deal with, but as a writer, I hope I can manage a group of this size and with these restrictions. Misgivings aside, here we are. Let's join our new and improved party and see what their day will bring. Chapter 35, Part 1, Day 30. Early morning. Mythic event. Move reality. Party status. Achille, 13 out of 13 hit points. Cord, 15 out of 18 after natural and magical healing. Dureni, 16 out of 16. Tentir, 15 out of 15. Fairwind, 23 out of 26 after receiving 1 point of natural healing. Flicker, 11 of 16 after natural and magical healing. Supplies. The companions have 9 portions of food remaining. Spells available. Achille can cast Enlarge, Message, Glitter Dust, and Detect Evil. Cord can cast Entangle, Locate Plants and Animals, Slow Poison, and Create Water. The Blink Dog was flicking her tail back and forth, sniffing Dureni's bag and begging for the food it smelled inside.
The name suits her,
said Fairwind, smiling. Dureni hefted his bag, wearing a mildly annoyed expression on his face.
Is everyone ready to go?
He asked. Fairwind caught the elf's meaning without understanding the words. He rolled up the first scroll of Gallandal, which he'd been studying since waking up an hour earlier, and slid it into its silver case. When he stood up, he grimaced at the stiffness in his back.
Did you learn anything?
Achille asked. using the common tongue.
A little,
replied the cleric.
However, it'll take many hours of work before I can say I've truly understood it. It's written in a language several centuries old, you know.
Achillea nodded, but pressed anyway.
But you say you learned a little.
I'll tell you as we walk,
said Fairwind, despite knowing how Durrani disliked it when they conversed while on the move. The companions struck camp and resumed their walk north through the forest of beech. As they went, the cleric explained what he'd garnered from the ancient text.
Now, as I said, it's not much. I've learned that this is the first of 2 scrolls, but my guess is that the Dorothi only ever had access to this one. I'll explain why in a minute. Although having one without the other is not useless, it is difficult, intentionally so, I should think, to glean complete information because the 2 texts work together like,
Here, the cleric spread both of his hands apart and then brought them together so the fingers from one hand fit between those of the other.
like a cog and wheel, you see? The purpose of the scrolls seems to be to show the location of something called the Golden Path, but I haven't been able to figure out what that is. It might be a real place, or it might simply be a metaphor.
You said you think the Dorothi only had the 1 scroll. Why is that?
Achillea prompted.
Oh, yes, I did say that, didn't I? The reason I think that is, given the incomplete map we found, the Dorothi were clearly still looking for this golden path. If they'd had both scrolls, I don't suppose they would have been.
At this point, Durrani shot a quick look of vexation in Achillea's direction. She, in turn, looked at Fairwind with an inclined head and pursed lips. He got the message, and they both fell back into silence. Hours later, when the sun was past its zenith, but still quite high in the western sky, Durrani called the halt. This was unexpected, as they had already stopped for the day's single repast, in which they'd consumed the rest of the cooked rabbit, and Cord had summoned a spring of water from the ground. They'd slaked their thirst, and also filled one of their skins to share throughout the day. Durrani had been in the lead, as per usual. He presently motioned for the others to approach, but his attention remained fixed on a distant hill to the north. Behind it, the range of mountains loomed, ghostly and cyclopean. Tender walked up to stand beside his brother, and the 2 elves conversed in low tones for a moment before Durrani turned around, with a troubled look on his face. Achillea tried to see what they saw, but her eyes were not as keen as theirs, and she couldn't make out anything in the distance, other than the usual shapes of hills and trees and rocks.
What is it?
She asked.
I think...
Durrani began. He cast a quick glance at Tentir, who nodded as if in confirmation.
I think I can see your tower ahead.
He said.
Where?
Durrani pointed to the northeast.
Do you see that hill over there? The one standing a little apart from the others.
Achillea thought she could see the hill, but it was impossible to make out actual details at this distance. Still, she accepted that what he said was true, and her heart jumped in her chest.
What do you wish to do, Achillea?
There's no point in running.
She replied, after a moment's deliberation.
But let's head in that direction, and, a hair willing, it will still be there when we arrive.
It took a full 30 minutes of travel before Achillea could make out the speck that the brothers had identified as the tower. Now for the first time, she wondered why, if they were all elves, their powers of sight should be so much keener than her own. She might have worried about it more if her anxiety over the tower hadn't been the greater. Despite quickening their pace and taking no breaks, an hour later, by which time the tower was easily visible, but they were still a good distance from it, the inevitable began to happen. The iron structure began to slowly fade from sight. The transition from there to not there took about 5 minutes to complete, but even if Achillea had sprinted from the moment it began, she wouldn't have come close to catching it in time.
Even if I could get there,
She said helplessly.
how could I hope to get in? The place has 1 door, with no handle on it.
This time, Achillea neither broke down nor despaired. In fact, since seeing the tower, her jaw had been tight, and she had felt even more resolve than before.
I won't let you down, Vapi.
She swore under her breath.
I promise.
The appearance and disappearance of the tower was directly inspired by my event meaning, move reality. So I suppose I'm in the market for a new one. Rolling my D percentile twice gives me 97 and 34. Consulting the tables, I see those are transform and expectations. Transform expectations? That seems like something I could work with.
I'm sorry, Achillea,
said Dureni. He remembered clearly how upset she had been the last time this happened.
Are you all right?
The half-elf nodded dumbly, while Cord put a wooden hand on her shoulder and Robin tweeted in sympathy. Fairwind had an idea.
Achillea, you are sure you'd never seen or heard about the tower before you went there? When was it you said? A few weeks ago?
Achillea shook her head. No.
Then I must deduce that our encountering it again, twice since, can be no coincidence. Perhaps its occupants are also searching for this Odok Zygog.
Achillea shrugged and closed her eyes in frustration. When Dureni and Tentir asked what the cleric had said, she translated in a flat voice.
It must be looking for something,
said Dureni.
Perhaps it's looking for you, Achillea,
suggested Tentir. Nobody thought that was very likely, given that she'd made every effort to catch it on the last occasion.
I wonder,
said Fairwind, scratching the growth of beard on his chin. He had half an idea, but it would take more study of the Dorothi scroll and the Dorothi map before he could fully form it. There's one question about solo play RPGs that folks always seem to ask, and it's a fair question. How do you handle mysteries in a game where you are both the DM and the PCs? In this story, the characters don't know why they keep seeing the tower, or why it seems to be moving along the same trajectory as their own course of travel. But I do know. It was back around episode 25 when it dawned on me in a kind of aha moment. So that's a complicated problem, but actually things are even more complicated, because I'm not just playing a solo RPG, I'm also making something with an audience in mind. The more I think about it, the more I think this makes a big difference in the way I play. It's not completely different from a just-for-me solo game, but it is meaningfully different. Now there's what the DM knows, what the characters know, and what the audience knows to play with. Where the rubber hits the road, there's a few ways to deal with mysteries in a solo game. Consider a riddle or a puzzle. The easiest moves would be to roll against a target stat, or just go with DM fiat. Somewhat more interesting would be to use the mythic event meaning tables to push creative solutions. But there are other methods, such as emailing a friend to see if they could solve it, with the friend acting as a proxy for your characters. That could be fun. Brian Rideout of Swords Against Madness has a really inventive one, literally. He sets himself the challenge of designing a table-worthy puzzle in a set amount of time. If he can't come up with something workable before his timer runs out, the characters can't solve the one in the story. I love the kind of creativity that goes into this medium. It's inspiring. Anyway, enough pontificating, let's get back to the business at hand. While the characters may be frustrated by recent events, there's some good news to share today, because this episode is a level up episode. Tentir has reached level 4. For that, he gets a d6 of new hit points. I'll roll that now. A 4 is pretty good. 15 goes to 19. His basic attack bonus will improve from +1 to +2, and there's a chance for stat increases. Let's hope for good luck as we roll for Strength, a 1. Intelligence, I got a 2. Wisdom, this would be a good time to get a bingo, as poor Tentir has a 6 in this stat. Alas, I've rolled a 2. Dexterity, 6. Bingo. That's excellent. 14 goes to 15. Let me see if this changes any modifiers. Okay, I've checked the BX rules and it does not, but it brings him within 1 point of it, so I'm very pleased. Let's see if we can squeeze any more luck out of this die. Constitution, I've got a 4. Charisma, a 5. Well, you know, all in all, that was a good level up. Not stupendously good, but good. Well done, Tentir. You deserve it. Moving on, I'm looking at my notes here, and I see that I have not made any hex crawl rolls for day 30. Maybe I can waive those, given the tower sighting, which is a pretty significant event. Yeah, let's assume that the rest of the day passes without further incident, but that foraging is unsuccessful. That's a fair trade. The PCs eventually run out of daylight and make camp. Now we need rolls for day 31. And I think at this point, I need to recalculate how far the companions are from their destination. I'm going to need a map for this. Hang on while I go away and crunch some numbers. Maybe this is a good time to take a quick ad break. I'll be right back. Okay, I've made a little back-of-the-napkin map and calculated that the companions are 4 days away from their original destination, assuming that Valkeen's directions were accurate. At this time, I think we're ready to do hex crawl rolls for day 31. First up is for the weather. At 10, that's a typical midsummer day. Stumble upon. A 7 means no result. Foraging is next. A 3 on a d6 indicates success with Court's help. I'll say that a patch of hedgehog mushrooms is discovered growing under an ancient shady oak. Wandering encounters are next. I'm back to making normal rolls for this, so using my d6, a 5 or 6 will indicate a random encounter. If that occurs, I'll use the same collapsed table from a few episodes back, the one that produced the Bling Dog encounter. By the way, that table is now posted on the blog if you'd like to see it, though you'll need to scroll back some. Anyway, here's the roll. A 5, so there will be an encounter. And here I was hoping for smoother sailing. Rolling on my collapsed table gives me... Alright, and for the subtable? Well, okay then. Chapter 35. Part 2. Day 31. 4 days from their destination. Late afternoon. Mythic event meaning. Transform. Expectations. Party status. Achillea. 13 of 13 hit points. Cord. 16 of 18, after receiving 1 point of natural healing. Dureni. 16 of 16. Tentir. 19 of 19. Fairwind. 24 of 26, after receiving 1 point of natural healing. Flicker. 12 of 16, after receiving 1 point of natural healing. Supplies. The companions have 4 portions of food remaining. Spells available. Achillea can cast Enlarge, Message, Glitter Dust, and Detect Evil. Cord can cast Entangle and Slow Poison. Fairwind can cast Cure Light Wounds and Protection from Evil. The thinning forest had emptied into a sward of long, dry grass. Here, the shapes of the northern mountains were so close and distinct that they seemed to have advanced. By now, Achillea had the pictures in Odok's sketchbook memorized to the last details, and while she couldn't match this vantage to any of them, she felt positive that they were close to finding the reclusive historian. By late afternoon, the companions were in yet another forest, this one of massive and ancient oak and fir trees. It was decided that they might well find mushrooms in such a place, and, by virtue of Cord's attunement to nature, they did. A patch of hedgehog mushrooms, arranged in a fairy ring at the base of a particularly old oak, was discovered. Dureni was in the lead, and got there first. He crouched down in front of the mushrooms and admired their flat, funnel tops of buttercream yellow above stalks of bone white. He knew better than to disturb a fairy ring without looking around first. A traditional elfin phrase, meant to be uttered before touching such things, came to his lips.
Be these claimed by any other, let them speak.
Dureni did not really expect an answer. Most so-called fairy rings were mundane, not belonging to any fey creatures. Even considering their own recent bad experience with the sprites, he was so unconcerned that he didn't even bother to look up. But suddenly, everything went strangely quiet.
Dureni.
Achillea's voice, strained. He raised his eyes and saw a pair of slender, pale green legs in front of him. Immediately, his insides turned to ice. Lifting his gaze, he beheld a female shape of exquisite proportions. Stark naked, but covered in places by tresses of long brown hair. Interwoven with the hair were dozens of shining green leaves and pink flowers, or possibly the plants and the hair were one. The creature's face, also pale green, was framed by its leafy hair. It was the picture of innocence and purity, with full lips, a wide, flat nose, and huge eyes of sparkling aquamarine. Its expression moved between shyness and curiosity, as it looked briefly from Dureni to Tentir, then at Achillea, who held Flicker tightly by the scruff of her neck. Here, the woodland spirit's gaze lingered, and it smiled briefly. Finally, it regarded Fairwind, Cord, and Robin. Of them all, these three seemed of greatest interest, for it gently parted its lips as though in wonder. It said, staring at Cord. Dureni drew back his hand from the mushrooms, slowly and showing his palms.
Spirit of the woods,
He said in Elvish.
I meant no offense.
A dryad is a beautiful female tree spirit which is bound to a specific tree and cannot venture far from it. They're shy and non-violent, but suspicious of strangers. If threatened, a dryad can use a powerful Charm Person spell that can imprison a victim inside their tree forever. A dryad's treasure is always kept buried under the roots of their tree. Before I can go any further with this encounter, I need to make a reaction check. This single roll is going to be vitally important, as the expert rules monster description gives plenty of clues as to what an extreme positive or extreme negative might look like. Since Dureni made first contact and his charisma score affords him a +1 bonus, I will apply that to the roll. The presence of Flicker, I will rule, also adds +1. I'm not sure how a dryad would feel about Cord, but Robin, being a taxidermied bird, must incur a -1 in the eyes of a forest spirit, right? So, all considered, I've got a +1 to the roll, and I am desperately hoping not to get a low result, because that would essentially introduce a save or die scenario. Well, here goes nothing. The forest spirit's eyes were limpid. It was staring up at Cord when Dureni stood up, backing away a step, with his empty palms showing. The movement startled the spirit, who pulled her pale green body quickly back behind. No, not behind, but into the massive trunk of the nearest oak. Dureni cast a worried look over his shoulder and saw that Tentir's face was drained of color. Came the sound again. When Dureni looked back, the beautiful wood spirit had returned, but was half in the tree and half out. It was examining the entire group with unmasked curiosity. It said,
I think it is a dryad. It would be best for us to leave.
Dureni said in a low voice, and then, this time to the wood spirit,
Forgive our trespass. We will leave you in peace.
The dryad cocked its head and stared directly into Dureni's face with huge, unblinking eyes. The elf stumbled back another step, holding one hand behind him and making a shooing gesture with it. Said the dryad, still holding Dureni's gaze in her own. The elf discovered that he was unable to look away or even to blink. Those eyes, they were so beautiful. He could get lost in them forever. Suddenly, the dryad stepped out of her tree and dropped into a crouch. It plucked 4 or 5 hedgehog mushrooms from the fairy ring and then straightened, proffering them to Dureni. Dureni swallowed and blinked hard. He took the gift and bowed. Before letting him go, the dryad gave him another gift. She pulled a tiny pink flower from her hair and put it into Dureni's hand, along with the mushrooms.
My thanks, wood spirit,
said Dureni, almost in a whisper, backing up as quickly as he could manage. The others were already a fair distance off. When he reached them, he said,
Go. Don't look back.
And led them all away. Thanks for listening to Tale of the Manticore. If you would like to support the show, there are many ways to help. You can recommend it online or to friends. You can like and repost episode announcements on social media. You can pick up a Tale of the Manticore t-shirt at beararts.store or one of my offerings on DriveThruRPG. In fact, I've been meaning to mention that the One Shot in the Dark ultralight solo game is now available in Portuguese, thanks to John of Daily Hero Forge. If none of those work for you, you can always rate or review the show on your podcatcher of choice. My thanks to everyone for their continued support. At this time, I'd like to read a listener review. This one was left on Audible by Zuhal. Zuhal writes, "This podcast is a jewel among gems. The story and characters constantly surprise and amaze you. The evolution is organic and die-driven. Even when there is death in the party, there is no flinching or rules lawyering. I love the authenticity, attention to detail that does not bog the pace down, and the leaps the story takes. Additionally, the music and sound effects, as well as the visiting characters, are solid gold." Much appreciated, Zuhal. I am so glad that you're enjoying the show, and I'm extra thrilled that you mentioned the music. And of course, I strongly agree with you about the cast of voice talent. They are superb. And this is where I make an unsubtle pivot into thanking my cast. Today, it's the small but mighty core cast of Kai Ellen, Kevin Berenger, and David Cooper, playing Dureni, Tentir, and Fairwind beautifully, as always. Now in these credits, I'd like to take an extra moment to thank all of the amazing visual artists who've contributed to the show, not just recently, but over the years. Special thanks go to the following people: Brandon Yu, Roland Diaz, Hodag RPG, Justin File, James Fulton, Tobias Neal, Simon Williams, Amanda T, Friendly Mike, Charles Featheroff, This is Bardcore, Del Tiegler, and finally, everyone who submitted sketches for my Odoks Sketchbook Challenge. I'll include those artists in the next episode's credits. My apologies if I mispronounced any names in that list, or especially if I left anyone out. I am grateful to everyone who has sent in their artwork. For those curious to learn more about Tale of the Manticore, I keep a blog where I post all kinds of show and RPG-related stuff, like the above-mentioned art, and also maps, tables, crafts, and show notes. You can find it at taleofthemanticore.com. To get in touch with me, I'm at soloroleplayersnetwork.com, taleofthemanticore.bluesky.social, Tale of the Manticore podcast on Instagram, or taleofthemanticore@gmail.com. The adventure will continue on the next episode of Tale of the Manticore, the story where chaos rolls.